Here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. President Biden said this hurricane could be the deadliest hurricane in Florida's history. Vows to give all the government assistance that's needed to help the folks out. And again, as I said yesterday, the thing that I'm grateful for in this moment, we don't have a child in the White House, a petulant child, a vindictive child in the White House, where you have to worry about, is something going to be done? Or is it going to be a stunt? Will there be paper towels thrown at people? This is how things are supposed to work. In fact, I saw images today of it looked like thousands of utility trucks, bucket trucks, just ready to get into Florida and do the work that needs to be done. This is how it should be. And I started thinking about, the transitions that this country has gone through over the last 100 years. The idea that, you go back to the Gilded Age, you go back to the good old days of the 80s and 90s, and not the 1980s and 90s, but back to the robber baron era of the 1870s, 1880s, the 1890s. That period was hooray for me and the heck with everybody else, where the rich got richer and the poor got poorer, and you had mass inequality. And interestingly enough, looks a lot like today. Extreme political polarization, the kind of hatred and anger that's being thrown around, the kind of divisions that are being thrown around, and of course, the massive inequality. Did I mention that? Did I mention the massive inequality? The fact that you had a handful of people who controlled such enormous amounts of wealth that they were able to control the political system that then, became so polarized that, almost nothing could get done other than what they wanted done. And people started questioning, is this the best form of government? Is this what we need? And it was the me time. And, we had a couple of wars, we had a depression, and somehow the country came together. A we generation, if you will. And I think of my grandparents' generation, that greatest generation, as that we generation, where when things happened, it was people got together. Yeah, you had radical self-interest. Yeah, you pursued your thing, but overall, it was how do you help your neighbor? How do you build community? Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. That kind of thinking. Now you go, well, Kennedy, that was the last throes of the we generation, and maybe it was. But here we are in this moment, looking a lot like the good old days of the 80s and 90s. Hooray for me and the heck with everybody else. Mass inequality, polarization, like we don't know how to get out of. And it's these kind of events, these tragedies, that the hope is that our better angels come out. Now, I look at the governor of Florida, and this has to be brought up. Now, nobody is saying, understand, nobody. And if there is someone saying it, we shout them down and we put them in their place. But nobody is saying that we shouldn't help Florida. Nobody. But it is important to remember that their governor, back in 2013, was one of the people who, was against the federal bailout of the folks of New York after Hurricane Sandy. He said it was an irresponsible boondoggle, a symbol of the put it on the credit card mentality that he had come to Washington to oppose. Now, I don't have a short-term memory. I remember that. Now, nobody's saying that we don't help them, but you kind of remember this. But I'll tell you, I saw the images of the just the miles long of trucks ready to go and ready to get to work. And it made me go, maybe this is the kind of stuff that pulls us together. That as a community, we have the ability to come back together and to move forward and to make things better and to use these tragedies and these horrible, devastating situations to make things even better on the other side. And this is why, again, I'm grateful that we've got someone in the White House who isn't petulant, isn't a child, isn't going to try and use this for their political advantages. No, we're going to get up and we're going to do the job. And that's the one thing I can say about Biden that I think is beyond reproach. This is a guy who gets up every day and does the work. Every day and does the work. Not a lot of words. No angry, weird, bizarre 3 a.m. tweets. But doing the work. Moving us in a direction that's forward, that's attempting to bring us back together. Now, will we? I don't know. I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful because I see a lot of organizing going on, the kind of organizing we had back in the Gilded Age, workers saying, you know what? Sorry, wealth class, we deserve, we earned, we should have, we must have, we demand a fair shake. A fair share of the wealth that our labor creates. There are groups saying that the kind of injustices that are going on have to stop. And it's that organizing. It's all of that, those voices together, rowing in the same direction that I believe can bring us back together. Just my thought. I'd love to hear yours. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com, or give us a call, 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. Love to hear your thoughts. Let's go to Kurt in Akron on line 1. Kurt, how are we doing today?
Hey, Rick, I guess I'm becoming a predictable caller now, aren't I?
You're right there.
But two days in a row at the first time out of the box. But anyway, you were talking about community and sense of community now, correct?
Yes.
Well, I got it. And I was telling your screener, I have a neighbor. I know he voted for Donald Trump twice, and he knows I voted for Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden. But you know what? We can make fun of each other in the sense of not getting nasty, which is a very rare thing to do. And he's one of the nicest neighbors to have in the sense that if you need help with something, he'll be there to do it. Like, for instance, after I mow my lawn, I notice, oh, my trim's been done. He would come with his weed eater and start doing the trim around my fence. And
wow, I need a neighbor like that.
And then, like, if my battery in my snowblower dies during a snowstorm, he's out there with his snowblower doing my driveway for me when he's doing his as well as our sidewalks together. He's always got treats for my 3 dogs, Katie, Molly, and Truman. And, he's just one of the nicest guys. And we can kind of put the partisan politics aside. But if we do talk about it, we joke about it. We make fun of each other in some sense. And we always walk away polite to each other. We always walk away saying, well, see you later, Rob. See you later, Kurt. Kind of, stuff like that.
Right.
He even told me because I wanted to get my steps on my porch replaced in the spring. He told me, if you get the materials, I got the tools, you tell me, we'll go and build them together. So, there is a way. You just got to, I guess people just need to find that common ground. Or maybe I got lucky and got if they're, for the lack of a better oxymoron, a sane Trump supporter.
No, look, I remember a time where we didn't judge each other based on who we voted for in the last election. But then again, the stakes, I don't think in the past were quite as high as they are in this moment, or as high as we're led to believe. But I look at some of the people who I've known over the years who have gone the Trump direction, and it does, sadly, it gets heated, it gets ugly. And look, in the past, I've had people, we get heated and have, good, solid, spirited, arguments, discussions, debates, whatever. And at the end of it, you go, hey, good for you. You scored yours, I scored mine. You moved on. I hope we can get back to that.
And, that's like when I was younger. I used to work in my grandpa's heating and cooling sheet metal shop as a teenager. That was my first job in school, was working in the family business. I think it was by law. every grandson of my grandfather had to work in that sheet metal shop. But anyway, let's call him Uncle Slug. I used to argue with my Uncle Slug all the time. I would be the more liberal viewpoint. He'd be the more conservative viewpoint. It got to the point where my grandpa, we would actually hear over a intercom system. He would sometimes listen in on the intercom from his office in that sheet metal shop, hearing me and my Uncle Slug debating each other and arguing with each other. But you know what? My Uncle Slug and I, to this day, we still get along. We don't agree on anything. In fact, his dad just passed away, so I
Sorry to
sent
hear
him a
that.
card. Yeah, well, you know what? He was 97, never spent a day in the hospital except for the last 13 hours of his life. So you can't really feel bad for a guy who's
give me
going
those.
to be 97. In fact, he was a month away from his 98th birthday. But anyway, we still get along. We call each other, or we at least try to call each other once a month anymore, and I told him when Trump got elected and everything else, I said, Mike, that's his name, Mike. I said, I don't want to talk about that. It's just not worth ruining a relationship that we've built over my lifetime. I said, I just don't want to get into that kind of thing. Let's just talk about other things, but let's just steer away from Donald Trump if we can, because it's just not worth ruining the relationship over. Now, my sister, on the other hand, she's calling for the Kool-Aid. She's drank the Kool-Aid, and, she just cannot seem to get past Donald Trump. And it's like,
I don't get the whole cult attraction. I've never had that kind of blind faith loyalty in any politician. Because look,
no,
I don't even agree with myself 100% of the time, let alone somebody else or somebody who a politician. I mean, to me, they're a tool to get the things that we need. This kind of cult of personality, I struggle with.
Exactly. And like yesterday when I told you I emailed Tom Vilsack about the whole thing with nutrition, health, the hunger, nutrition, health care thing that he did yesterday at the White House with the president. It's not so much a worship thing. It's just we actually got to know each other about 20 years ago, and we genuinely like each other as people and became friends. I don't think that's cult personality. It's just we know each other more on a personal level. So therefore, we have that going for us. Yeah. But I just don't get the cult thing. Like, for instance, if Joe Biden were to come to town and speak, maybe I'd go see him, depending on how far away it is. But I'm not going to be one of these Trumpists who travels all over the country spending $30,000 to go to every Trump rally out there just because I need to be there.
Nope. I'm right there with you.
And I'm not going to fly a Biden flag, and I'm not going to, do all that kind of stuff either, because at the end of the day, like you said, he's just a politician, but more importantly, he's just a human being, and he's the tool working for us. And I don't mean it in a bad sense. I don't mean he's a tool, but you know what I mean. Yeah. But he's just not God to me, and he's my president. He's not my God. That's what it comes down to.
And then that's where we'll leave this, because that's a perfect way to go ahead and end this. And I'm with you. I wish we could have these conversations. We could not hate on each other as much and be so polarized. And maybe we will someday. Maybe it's coming, but I don't see it right now.
I hope so.
Me too. Appreciate the call, Kurt.
And good luck on your travel.
Thanks so much. Appreciate it. Love to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com, or give us a call, 1-866-416-RICK, 1-866-416-7425. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. Also, if you miss any portion of the program, make sure you get the podcast. Never miss an episode. Or if you find your favorite podcast, you'll find ours. We're going to take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. Listen to The Rick Smith Show. If you're a fan of the show, you've heard our labor history in 2 segments, and you can hear them on the radio pretty much anywhere in the U.S. Labor history has never been more important than it is right now. So here's what we'd like you to do. Tell a teacher. Tell a teacher that labor history is important and that they can get digestible 2-minute lessons that are absolutely free. Free to download, free to use, free to share. Tell a teacher to go to thericksmithshow.com/history and help us put labor back where it belongs, in the classroom. You know, generations of American workers fought, bled, and died to build the American way of life. It's our job to keep their stories alive. Go tell a teacher that we're here to help them do just that. Find us at thericksmithshow.com/history today.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
One 416 Rick. 1-866-416-7425. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So we are about to embark on our Working Class Heroes radio tour. I'm going to kick off in Allentown, Pennsylvania. And it's one of those choices that I made in this because, I remember, it's been 40 years since the Billy Joel song Allentown came out. This song about, working class grit, how, you just an area devastated by deindustrialization and all of the forces that were, just attacking the working class. And, knowing that you're going to just get up and you're going to keep slugging away and keep hammering away. So we thought that would be a good place to start. So we're going to visit our friends at Teamsters Local 773 there in Allentown and sit down and have some conversations with folks as we make our way through. I'm excited about what we're going to find. And as I said, over the last couple of days, our goal is to try and find that common thread, because I believe what binds us, and to pick up on, what Kurt said, I mean, there are always going to be differences. The idea is that maybe you put some of those differences aside and you find the things that unite us. And I keep coming back to the one thing that I do know is that, in the workplace is the way that we can unite people. That, fighting for better wages, for better hours, for better working conditions. That's the way forward. And, like I said, the reality is there's massive income inequality in this country. The powerful and the wealthy and the elite, they control the mass of the wealth in this country. And we talked about this yesterday, how the top 1% owns 34% of the wealth of this country, while the bottom half, the bottom 50%, 150 million people control just 2% of the wealth. In fact, they pointed out in the CBO study that the bottom 25% of people in this country have negative wealth. That's a problem. That's a problem when you're talking about, massive income inequality. And I look at what's going on at a place like Amazon. I say all the time, I think the way forward are strong labor unions. If we want to recreate that recipe of the greatest generation, that recipe that we look back to as the most prosperous era for working people, that would be the 50s, 60s into the 70s. You did that by having really high tax rates on the very wealthy and corporations. You had strong investment by government, massive investment. Both Democrats and Republicans, there was near consensus. I mean, Eisenhower had one of the biggest spending bills to invest in this country with the highway bill. There was almost no difference between Democrats and Republicans at the time because the voters, you and me, us, we demanded it. Policy-wise, there wasn't a lot of difference. And because of that, you had strong investment in things like infrastructure, strong investment in things like healthcare and education, and strong investment in moving this country forward. And you had really strong labor unions. And I come back to this moment and go, that's the way forward in this. So when I see this story out of Amazon in Albany, New York, where evidently Amazon, according to their LM20s, Amazon is spending $3,200 per day for a union buster to come in and berate a warehouse worker making about 15 or 16 bucks an hour. Stop, think about that for a minute. I mean, this is one of those things where, my grandfather always said, if a rich guy's going to take a buck out of his pocket to tell you don't need something, you better spend two to get it. They're literally spending $3,200 per person per day to tell someone making 15, 16 bucks an hour, no, you don't need that stinking union. We have an open door policy. You can come in anytime you want. And you could say anything you want, and we can fire you for any reason we want. Because that's the reality of the world that we now live in and have lived in for a very long time. The reality of this is until we start this process of organizing and continuing to make demands. I go back to this frame of 120, 125 years ago. You go back to the Gilded Age, the last robber baron era, where you had the opulent wealthy, and you had a lot of working poor. I mean, the similarities between now and the 1880s, staggering. And it's what the wealth class wants. And this is where you go, we got to put down our differences, because, as Kurt was saying in the last segment, they're both cutting their grass, they're both shoveling their snow, they're both working in a common space. They can work together. And we should be doing that. We should be looking at each other as, hey, how can we help each other, instead of looking at each other and how we can give each other the what. That's what I'm hoping to find on this tour as we begin talking to people, talking to organizations and groups about the work that they're doing, how they're moving forward, how they're organizing, what the next step forward is. Not so much looking back at how we recreate the past, although we can learn from the past. How do we take the lessons and move forward to ensure that people have opportunities? And this is, for me, the interesting part. Now, we're going to be in Chicago on October 11th. These are hard dates. We'll be in Detroit on October 7th for an event with our friends at One Fair Wage. We'll be in Chicago on October 11th for a movie event with Greg Palast. Also, with Rainbow Push and Jesse Jackson. Their group is going to host the event along with the Rick Smith Show. Also in Minneapolis on the 12th, we'll be out there meeting folks and showing the movie with Greg Palast as well. And then the 29th, we're going to be in Cincinnati for the Dropkick Murphys concert. And the 31st, we will be in Cleveland for another event with the folks from One Fair Wage. All along the road, we're going to be making more announcements on where we're going to be, what we're going to be doing. So you can follow us at thericksmithshow.com, on Twitter at Rick Smith Show. This is going to be it's going to be interesting. We've got a lot of stuff planned. We've got a lot of people to talk to, a lot of places to be. Going to be fun. Going to be entertaining. Going to be educational. Oh no, not that. Yes, might actually learn something about areas and the work that they're doing, and hopefully we find those places where things have gotten bad, but they're getting better. That's, for me, what I'm looking forward to. I'm going to take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2.
On this day in labor history, the year was 1929.
That was the day a mistrial was declared in the case of 16 textile mill unionists in North Carolina. The mistrial sparked 5 days of anti-union vigilante violence. Textile mill workers at Gastonia's Lorry Mill had been on strike since April 1st. They demanded higher wages and shorter work hours, union recognition, and an end to the hated stretch-out system. Soon, textile workers at Bessemer City's American Mill walked off the job in solidarity and joined the National Textile Workers Union. Ella Mae Wiggins was one of the strike leaders at American Mill. She was known for her militancy, but also for organizing black workers into the union. As the strike wore on, mill owners evicted dozens of families from company housing. Wiggins helped set up a tent city. On June 7th, sheriff's deputies attacked strikers who marched to Lorry Mill to call out remaining workers. The police arrived at the tent colony later that evening to disarm them, and Gastonia's police chief wound up dead. Immediately, more than 70 textile union members and leaders were rounded up and arrested. 16 stood trial for the murder of Chief Adderholt. The Anti-Union Committee of 100 smashed up the NTWU headquarters in Gastonia and Bessemer City. They kidnapped, beat, and threatened to kill several union members. The rampage continued as scab forces moved onto Charlotte to raid the offices of the International Labor Defense, who had handled the strikers' case. 5 days into the terror, Wiggins was killed on her way to a union solidarity rally. Outrage over her murder forced mill owners to improve conditions and wages, but the fight to organize would continue for years. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter at laborhistoryin2.
It's been a record year of runaway wealth for America's billionaires, with this tiny clique vastly widening the chasm separating them from us hoi polloi. For example, Amazon hefe Jeff Bezos hauled in $190 billion for the year. That pays him more than $360,000 a minute for every single minute of the year. So much taken by so few, who do so little while harming so many. Bezos erected his corporate empire on the backs of non-union workers he routinely exploits, plus millions of taxpayers he bilks. Indeed, his recent surge of wealth comes not from innovation or hard work, but from the windfall of bloated Wall Street stock prices, making him richer without lifting a finger. Yet, media and politicians hail Jeff as a big-thinking genius. Seriously? This self-centered ego's top achievement this year was to have the world's largest super yacht built for him, a 400-foot-long seagoing palace. But, oops, Jeff's pleasure craft can't get to the ocean because it's too tall to go under a bridge just downriver from the Dutch city where he's having it built. No problem for a billionaire genius, though. Boss Bezos simply instructed local officials to dismantle their historic bridge so his toy could pass through. But no go, for outraged locals learned of his imperious scheme and quickly organized a massive rotten egg brigade, pledging to pelt the colossal yacht and possibly Jeff. Very bad political optics. So the American mogul's billions were not allowed to buy his way out. This is Jim Hightower saying, it's still unclear how he'll get it out to sea, but one Dutch wag helpfully pointed out to him, you can still take your giant boat out for short trips down to the bridge and back. If these mega-rich privileged ones are so smart, why are they so stupid?
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So do you remember right after Trump left office that they had this kind of a tour that they were doing, his speaking gigs? You know, there was a company that said, we're going to trot, Trump around and we're going to do speeches and all kinds. It was the American Freedom Tour. You remember that? It was a multi-million-dollar deal. It was all kinds of stuff. Evidently, again, not surprising. You know where this is going. Anything having to do with Trump, you do know where, when it comes down to money, you know where it's going. Evidently, the organizers of this whole American Freedom Tour, evidently they're not paying their bills. And you knew that was the punchline, didn't you? Because anything attached with the former guy comes with a nobody paid the bill. And that's the thing that gets me. I don't get how working people will support this guy when they're the ones always picking up the check. Nobody likes to go to the bar with the guy who never picks up the check. And yet, as a country, we've been picking up the check. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the top stories of the day, and maybe she doesn't mind picking up the check. I've asked our good friend Sarah Burris to come talk with us. She's a reporter at Raw Story. RawStory.com is the website. Sarah, thanks for taking time for us.
Hello, happy Thursday.
And happy Thursday to you as well. So what do you make of this? Can't pay the bills.
Of course they can't. They never could. Like that was the thing though, is like early on, whenever he started running for office, they wouldn't pay security bills. They wouldn't, and all through his presidency when he would do rallies, like I had a running story for a long time where I would just keep updating the same story over and over again about whether or not he paid the overtime for this police force or that one. And it's like he got into a fight with the mayor of Detroit at one point because he wouldn't pay for the cops there. And it's like, dude, you want to pretend that you're some blue line dude and then you just decide, oh, you're going to work for me for free. So it's, that is Donald Trump. It's always been Donald Trump. It always will be Donald Trump. And everybody needs to just be like, yeah, we get it. Yeah. You're not going to get paid. This will be for free. You're doing this as a donation to Donald Trump. Congratulations.
He's going to stiff you. You know it's going to happen. Or what was the guy who running for? Just lay back. If you know it's coming, just lay back and enjoy it, right?
Oh, God. Yeah. Yeah.
Rim shot, right?
Yes.
Still a wrong. All right, never mind. Evidently, there's a new super PAC. MAGA Incorporated. There's going to be some money going into MAGA Incorporated. And what's the punchline? Money's going to Trump.
Of course it is. All of the money before was going to Trump. Like that is the thing is all of these candidates are just now starting to understand, oh crap, the endorsement from Trump really doesn't get me anything. If you are very, very selectively lucky, he might do a rally in your state that he lets you come to. But he's not going to give you money. He's not going to do independent expenditures that he pays for. He's not going to do, I mean, maybe you'll get a robocall out of it, right? Like this dude gives no Fs, right? Like he does not care about your campaigns. He just wants to look good and be able to raise money off of somebody else's, like, oh, I need you to donate to me so that I can give it to candidates. When the reality is he's giving it to his lawyers.
Yep.
It was the one that we talked about last week, the $3 million lawyer. Yeah, nobody wants to work for him.
If you're smart, yeah. You don't do anything with him unless the money's in the bank. Not a check, not on the way, not here's a check, my name's in it might be on it. No, it's got to be cashed.
In the bank.
Funds in deposit.
Not even just a check. Like I think it's got to be like a straight up wire transfer at this point.
No, I want stacks of cash. You better be walking around with briefcases full of money.
Yeah.
Because that's where sadly that
and
is.
he wouldn't have a briefcase. It'd be like a paper bag. he's the paper bag kind of bribe dude, right?
Yeah, and he before he handed it to you, he'd make up a fake name so he could pretend he's somebody else before he introduces himself.
And he's the kind of guy too that would put like hundreds on the top and the bottom, but in between it would be nothing but ones.
Or blank pieces of paper. Yeah, I don't doubt that. I don't doubt it at all.
Yeah, be careful.
But hey, the weird thing is, and this is the thing that gets me. People are still sending them money. They're still fleecing people. I mean, at some point, do you not go, yeah, I've been taking enough. The con goes on. In fact, as the hurricane is going on, he's out there shilling for more money.
Yeah, and I mean, at a time when a whole bunch of other politicians are like, yeah, we're gonna shut some stuff down right now. We're gonna stop raising money. We're gonna stop our political commercials because it turns out it looks bad if in between the weather reports, before your power goes out, your political campaign ads are showing up, right? Like it's just not a good look. Trump doesn't care about any of that. He never did. Like there was an old thing for a while about they wouldn't run campaign ads on 9/11. It's like, of course Trump is going to make his own 9/11 ad and talk about how, he's the king of 9/11 or something. And because he shook Rudy Giuliani's hand. It's just, the whole thing is, he is just such a crook. And, it's just,
yeah.
It's always going to be about money with him. It's trying to get more. It's never enough, first of all. And if he can't get enough of it, he's just going to lie about having it.
And that's the thing that gets me. I'm going, why would, it's like the televangelist. Why would you send these people money? It's the same thing. I don't know why you would send, I don't know why you'd send any money, but.
It's because they think of him as Jesus. Like, that's the thing, right? Is all the QAnon people think that he is the new Christ, the second coming or whatever.
Well, didn't Liz Cheney the other day say that they used to refer to him as Orange Jesus?
Yeah, the members, whenever they were, who were they voting for? There was something that they signed off on where one of the Republican members said, the things we do for the Orange Jesus.
See, now you could sell one of those to put on the dashboard.
Oh man, geez. I'm happy with my little Buddy Christ figurine. I think that is amazing. That is the best one from Dogma. It's the best. It's the happy Jesus, right? Like, because it turns out the crucifix is really kind of a downer. George Carlin is a priest. That was the best movie ever.
I'm right there with you. You listen to the Rick Smith Show. We're here with Sarah Burris. Sarah's a reporter at Raw Story, rawstory.com, the website. Check out the work that she does. So the January 6th committee hearing that I was so looking forward to on Wednesday, postponed, but Jenny Thomas did indeed testify, and she's sticking to it. She's sticking to her story, Sarah. The election was stolen.
So that is what the members did talk about today. They were very cagey on a lot of stuff. Like, we really tried to get them to talk about anything that she said, and they would not talk about much, other than the fact that she was sticking to her story. She's not changing anything. She is a true believer, and she thinks that Donald Trump still won the 2020 election. And that blows my freaking mind. You know, like, that this woman really is that far up Trump's bum that she truly believes. Like, she has gone full Q. And it is I've been reading the Denver Riggleman book at the same time and writing about that every once in a while. And the one thing that he keeps saying is that we're talking about all three branches of government at this point that was taken over by these people that are not just, that's not just like a Republican thing. These are flat out QAnon people. Yeah.
And look, here, Jenny Thomas is the wife of the Supreme Court Justice.
Yes. And Riggleman is convinced that Clarence Thomas is just as full Q as Jenny is. So, I mean, a lot of the members today had the ones that weren't in the committee hearing, some of the senators were talking about, like, this is not a good look. This is not acceptable that, you know, somebody that close to such a big position in power is a conspiracy nut, like a straight up cultist. And that's scary. And it's something that, you know, I wish I could get to a point where I could make jokes about it, because I feel like that is kind of a little bit ripe for some humor. But for a minute, like, I'm really just like, damn, this is bad.
No, it's terrible. But here it gets even worse, because, you know, okay, you can have someone who's got some mental illness, and look, if poor Clarence gets her some help, maybe there's hope for her. But the sad reality is the most recent Monmouth poll just came out. 61% of Republican voters still believe that voter fraud's the only reason Joe Biden won, that the election was stolen.
And you know, I still am surprised that number is as low as it is, frankly. I feel like it would have been, you know, the way that the Republican Party is, I'm shocked that it's not at the 90 percentile, because most of the people, right, that are Republicans who are not completely insane have left. And so the fact that there's just enough, right, that are still not completely nuts, that at least gives me a little bit of optimism, right? If we have to find the positive in anything, it's like, oh wow, there are still members of the Republican Party who believe that the election was legitimate. But still, I mean, you know, there are quite a few nutters that have taken over a main party of the U.S. government.
Oh no, there are a bunch of nutters. In fact, those people running around saying that, you know, Trump's going to be vindicated and JFK Jr. is coming back. I mean, that whole thing was just pure nuttery. But they're sticking to it.
Conspiracy theory. That is my favorite. Is this like, and it, like, is this a Lazarus situation? Is he gonna raise from the dead? Is he gonna, like, are we gonna have zombie JFK Jr. walking around running as Trump's running mate, making death great again? I don't know. Um, but yeah, like this is, and for a while, you know, I think they thought that this was really gonna kind of quiet down after Trump lost, and it hasn't. And now Trump is just really inciting more of the QAnon nutters because, you know, when you're put into a corner,
Yeah.
you,
Isn't he
you
wearing a
reach out
Q?
for.
Hasn't he been seen wearing the Q on his lapel and stuff?
They have made like memes about him that show him wearing it, but
Have
I don't
they?
think he actually has. Yeah, there's a bunch of memes, and there's like one where he has this big like burly beard, and where he looks sort of like the political brawny man or something. It's very strange. Like there's a bunch of memes out there, and he shares every single one of them, and I'm just like, why? You know, I have to watch the stupid page for stories and stuff, and I'm just like, why are you sharing all of this crap? And of course he does it as like a flood, so it's like 50 different memes all at once, and you're just like have to scroll and scroll, and you're like, why?
Because he wants to make your life miserable.
Yeah, that's true. And
No,
then
because he's someone who believes that no PR, there's no such thing as bad PR. So as long as someone's saying his name, you know, it doesn't matter if it's good, bad, different. As long as someone's saying his name, as long as someone's giving him attention, he's happy.
But I think too, like he really does not have a lot of people left that are his besties, and so those that are left, you know, that percentile of Republicans that are left who still embrace him, I think he's just trying to figure out different ways to bring them closer. Because he needs them. He needs them for validation. He needs them for, you know, people to buy him a steak, and clearly people to run for security for him for free.
And do all kinds of other things for him for free. So are we buying the Maggie Haberman story that he was one tweet away from firing Ivanka and the son-in-law? Are we buying that?
I wouldn't be surprised. I think he probably was one tweet away from doing a whole bunch of stuff, right? Like the dude is the moodiest male I've ever seen in my life. And so it seems like he was probably one tweet away from it, you know, dropping a nuke on somebody, and one tweet away from it. It really is just that much of somebody who can be baited with one tweet that was in the Oval Office. So I wouldn't be surprised. I am really scared about her book coming out, because that's going to be just 600 pages of crazy. I mean, holy crap, that's going to be bad.
Yeah, here's my problem. I mean, where was all that stuff when it mattered?
Exactly. Like it's different. I think there are a lot of stories that are just silly, goofy, like nobody cares kind of stories. But when it comes to like Ford's book, where he didn't reveal that Trump knew COVID was a legitimate thing back in March of 2020. You know, like there are so many different stories from some of the other books that should have been in the impeachment hearing. Some of the information, I guarantee you, from Maggie Haberman's book are things that should have been in the. And I mean, I get the idea that you need to make money, but there is some aspect to what journalism is when it comes to a public service. Like I get it. You got to make some money, but you also have to put the country first. And none of these people did that. And it's so frustrating. It's one of those the one things that I keep coming back to is like, you know, Woodward, right? Like Bernstein were icon. Cousin, like All the President's Men for the first time. And so you find out that Woodward is like holding back a bunch of stuff from the country just to sell a book. And you're like, man, really? That guy too?
Yeah, him
but
too.
Haberman, like the thing is about Haberman is she's in deep with the Trumps, and she has been for a while, and the Kushners. So, you know, it doesn't surprise me. It's the old people, you know, the old time political people where I'm just like, oh man, you too?
So let me ask you a couple more, real quick, couple more. Herschel Walker. I can't believe
Nutter.
I can't believe people are even considering voting for him. But you're right, Nutter. But this idea that he's doing the Jesus thing.
Yeah.
While talking about having a gun to his wife's head, I don't know. I don't think Jesus would have been on board with him holding the gun to his wife's head. I don't think so.
It reminded me a lot of the evangelicals who, when they, cheat on their wives or they sleep with a prostitute or they, are stealing a whole bunch of money or something, right? They just come up with I'm going to repent. And he didn't even he skipped the repent part, right? He didn't ask for forgiveness. He's like, oh, we all sin.
Yeah.
It's like, no, I feel like maybe attempted murder is a little bit bigger than just like Bill Clinton talking about not giving a BJ, right? Like, it's just, I don't know. Call me crazy.
I'm with you. And finally, Ken Paxton. Isn't he the Attorney General of the state? Why would you be running? Why would you be running like a criminal? Why? Oh, why?
That image in my head, right, is like the way that it worked is he legitimately, his wife came out of the house, opened the back door of their truck, hops in and starts to flee, and he runs out and jumps into the moving car. And you're like, how is this not on GoPro? Like, if I need everybody in the country, every process server in the country needs to understand, if you are serving a subpoena to any politician, please, for the love of God, wear a GoPro, because It's going to be funny and you're going to make a ton.
You're going to make a ton of money. Absolutely. No, that's where my mind was. I'm like, why isn't this an episode of Cops? And then why isn't he tackled and beaten into submission and like everybody else?
Yeah. Yep. And why hasn't he still accepted service of the subpoena? Like, what is it that you have to hide? If you thought that this was such a, dangerous guy, and now you find out, no, actually not. Yeah. Well, then accept service of the subpoena and go testify, you idiot.
Yeah. I mean, you're going to have to show up somewhere. Crazy times, but thank goodness you're there to report on it and share the stories. Sarah,
it's been a wild week.
As always, I appreciate the time. Amazing stuff.
Thank you. Have a good weekend, guys.
You as well, our good friend Sarah Burris. Make sure you check out her website, rawstory.com. That's where you can find all the incredible work that she does and all the stories that she's working on. Highly suggested. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1789. That was the day that the United States Congress officially created the United States Army. Not everyone agreed that the U.S. should have a standing army. 2 years earlier, at the meeting that drafted the U.S. Constitution, James Madison warned against a permanent federal army. He told those at the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia, quote, "A standing military force with an overgrown executive will not long be safe companions to liberty." Since Madison was a strong proponent of a centralized federal government, his caution about the Army was noteworthy. Perhaps these warnings is why it took Congress until the last day of their session to finally approve the measure. In fact, President George Washington had to write Congress not once, but twice to get them to act on the issue. Once it was approved, the first standing army had about 800 members. By comparison, in 2015, the Army had just under 500,000 active duty soldiers. To supplement the small army, Congress also made a provision for the president to call up troops from state militias. The stated purpose for such call-ups was, quote, protecting the inhabitants of the frontiers of the United States from hostile incursions of the Indians. While in federal service, the state militias were supposed to receive, quote, the same as the pay and substance as the regular army. One time, various state militias were used for the forced removal of the Cherokee people from the southeast on the Trail of Tears in the 1830s. State militias were also deployed to break up labor strikes. such is the case in the Homestead Strike in Pennsylvania in 1892. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. So on October 11th, we're going to be in Chicago. Our good friends at WCPT AM 820 and Rainbow Push. We're going to be doing a Greg Palast movie event while we're there at the Push headquarters in Chicago. On the 11th, also on the 12th in Minneapolis, at the Crooners Lounge. We're going to be there showing the event. Greg Palast is going to be there to answer some questions. And we're going to be a great opportunity to meet, greet, say hello, all of that stuff. And talking about what? Well, talking about voter suppression. That's right. You look at what Georgia has done with their law. It's about throwing people off the voting rolls. It's about challenging people. And one of the things that Greg does in his movie is he goes and he finds the suppressors. In fact, the one woman, he actually went to her home and said, "Hey, do you know so-and-so? No? Then why'd you challenge this person's vote? How about this person?" Turns out she challenged like 30,000 people. And now we find out that, there's a huge push of conservative activists in Georgia who are doing just that, challenging thousands of voter registrations of people in Georgia to throw them off the voting rolls just before the October 17th, election voting starts in Georgia. Get them off, get them fighting for their right to vote. Maybe they won't vote. Maybe you can. And it reminds me of something that Tom Corbett, the governor of Pennsylvania, said when he was candidate Corbett. Someone was asked, "Well, how do you think you're going to do?" And he goes, "Well, if we could just hold the vote down in Philadelphia, we'll do just fine." And that's the key. Again, dog whistle. By Philadelphia, he means minority votes. If you can hold those down, those Democrats, if you can hold that down, then you're going to do, then you can do all right. Now, they will lie, cheat, steal. They're going to do whatever they have to do because they're going to win by any means possible. Now, remember, they believe that Biden stole the election, so now they somehow feel entitled. And I looked at this story in Michigan. A poll worker there has been charged with a crime after a witness saw him insert a USB drive into an electronic poll book. I guess this happened after the August 2nd statewide primary, according to the Detroit Free Press. Again, this is one of those moments where you go, but I thought you were there to make sure that nobody does any criming. Oh, that's right. You're here to actually do the criming. Got it. This is where, again, when someone points their finger at you, they got three pointing back. And this is where I'm concerned about this kind of stuff all over the country. Because when you got 61% of the Republicans believing that the last election was stolen from them, what do you think they're going to be willing to do this time around? Their mindset is, well, we got something stolen from us, we're going to steal it back, even though nobody can point to anything that says, yeah, this was the crime. There's no there, but it's well, these are the believe people. Remember, these are the believers. These are the cult folks. Scary times ahead. But if you're in Chicago, October 11th, in Minneapolis, October 12th, looking forward to seeing everyone as we come out and visit and have the movie event. Really looking forward to it.
This is a major storm. This is going to be a nasty day, 2 days. So this is going to be a rough stretch.
Hurricane Ian causes widespread damage and smashes records as it pummels Florida. Senator Joe Manchin's controversial permitting reform bill collapses in the Senate. Plus,
European leaders are accusing Russia of sabotage.
Massive, mysterious ruptures on Russian natural gas pipelines to Europe.
All of those mysteries and disasters straight ahead from BradBlog.com. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
This is going to be something that is going to be there for days and weeks and months and unfortunately even years.
And unfortunately, not unlike Governor Ron DeSantis. This is your Green News Report. Okay, Desi Doyen, we have been watching this one coming in for days, and, well, looks like now it has.
Yes, Hurricane Ian made landfall on the west coast of Florida on Wednesday as a powerful Category 4 storm, just shy of a Category 5, near Fort Myers, battering the peninsula with catastrophic storm surge, winds, and flooding. According to preliminary data, Ian's storm surge was at least 12 feet. It toppled high water records, particularly in Fort Myers and Naples. At least 2 million Floridians are without power, and that is likely to increase as the storm crawls across Florida. Some areas could remain without electricity for days or longer amid stifling heat and humidity. Floods also impacted several municipal water systems. The National Hurricane Center forecasts the slow-moving storm will bring more torrential rainfall and flooding over the next several days. Parts of Florida could receive as much as 30 inches of rain. States of emergency have already been declared by governors in Georgia, Virginia, and the Carolinas as Ian tracks northward. And the storm may also spawn tornadoes.
That's a whole lot of splaining some of those Florida climate change deniers are going to have to come up with. 30 inches of rain?
Yep. On top of breaking flood records, Ian also set a new record for rapid intensification so close to landfall. It broke the wind speed record for a storm this late in the calendar year, and it now ranks in the top 5 most intense hurricanes ever to make landfall in the United States. Rapid intensification, storm intensity, higher storm surge due to rising sea levels, all are linked to man-made global warming.
Go figure.
At the White House, President Biden pledged long-term federal assistance for the response and recovery. He also noted that the storm is not affecting gasoline production at refineries in the Gulf, with a warning for oil and gas companies.
Do not use this as an excuse to raise gasoline prices or gouge the American people. If gas companies try to use this storm to raise prices at the pump, I will ask officials to look into whether price gouging is going on.
Recovery will be long and arduous for the state, with losses and damages projected to be in the billions. Florida's property insurance market was already unstable due to heavy losses from storms in previous years. At least 10 insurers in the state went bankrupt in the last year alone.
So that'll fall on the taxpayers to have to cover those losses in that case?
Most likely.
Go figure.
In other news, European leaders have accused Russia of sabotage in 3 massive ruptures that were observed on the 2 Nord Stream undersea natural gas pipelines in the Baltic Sea. An investigation is underway, but the EU leaders say Russia directly benefits from higher energy prices and economic disruption across Europe. Both pipelines were out of service as a consequence of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The leaks don't impact Europe's energy supplies, but are releasing massive amounts of climate-warming methane into the atmosphere.
They don't affect Europe's supply because Russia had already shut down those pipelines to Europe?
Correct.
And Europe has been finding their gas elsewhere in advance of winter.
Indeed. Here in the U.S., the Forest Service has launched a criminal investigation into electric utility giant Pacific Gas and Electric and whether its equipment ignited the Mosquito Fire, California's biggest wildfire of 2022 so far. PG&E's decrepit equipment has been found responsible for sparking many deadly fires in the state over the last several years. And finally, in the nation's capital, Coal State Democratic Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia withdrew his very controversial legislation focused on permitting reform to speed up energy projects, both fossil and renewable, around the country. It was part of a side deal that Manchin had made with Senate leadership to secure his vote for the Inflation Reduction Act. The bill had split the Democratic caucus, was seen as a massive gift to the the fossil fuel industry, but it was Republicans who ultimately ensured the demise of Manchin's bill despite the huge boost to fossil fuels.
Republicans. I'm starting to not trust those guys. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to today, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find, follow, and share us planet-wide on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report.
Are you tired of think tank-approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So Joe Manchin's predicting that the Democrats are going to hold the Senate in the new term. He's predicting 51-49. He says that maybe Pennsylvania, maybe Ohio. He's leaning towards Ohio. I wonder why. I like Tim Ryan. I like Tim Ryan a lot. I like John Fetterman a lot. I actually think that Fetterman's got a better shot of winning than, but we'll see. I would like to see them both win. I'd like to see Mandela Barnes win. There's a bunch of folks I'd like to see win. I'd like to see 55-45. That's where I would like to see, so we can make Joe Manchin totally irrelevant, and maybe send him home because he doesn't seem to mind. Anyway, here to share some thoughts on the upcoming races and the top stories of the day. I've asked our good friend Max Burns to come talk with us. Max is a Democratic strategist, also a columnist over at the Daily Beast. Max, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks for having me.
So what do you make of this? Joe Manchin's thinking 51-49.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is certainly within the realm of possibility. I think the Economist poll now gives Democrats a 4 in 5 chance of holding the Senate. And there are certainly a whole roster of terrible Trump candidates out there that are just getting creamed. I mean, the RNC, I think, has stopped funding Blake Masters in Arizona. Dr. Oz is toast. J.D. Vance, being crazy didn't seem to help him. And Tim Ryan has run a campaign that is pitch perfect for Ohio. I mean, we may not agree on much, but these aren't national races. And you have to appeal to your electorates, and Tim Ryan certainly does that.
No, absolutely. And, I look at the most recent Franklin and Marshall poll here in Pennsylvania out that has Fetterman up over Dr. Quack 47-43 and Shapiro beating the Nazi Mastriano 52-42. And I'm like, well, please let that be true. Please.
Oh, I saw that Doug Mastriano just announced 40 days of prayer to save his campaign. He might need a little bit more than that.
And fasting. And I said, well, why don't you take that and walk into the woods with it and then don't come back?
Yeah, I mean, that and 400,000 new registered voters might make a difference. But on its own, all these candidates are in trouble. And they're struggling, one, to outrun sort of the Trump hangover, and two, to outrun their own positions on abortion. I mean, they have scrubbed their websites. They've stopped talking about it. But these things keep popping up. Mastriano's comments from 2019 about wanting women to be charged with murder for having an abortion. These are things that aren't going away. And there is a deep well for Democrats to draw from to let voters know that.
Yeah, and I think they got to get their messaging straight. And I looked at California Governor Gavin Newsom basically saying that, how is it we're losing the messaging war when there's so much out there, especially on the crime front, as he accurately pointed out. Red states much more dangerous than most blue states.
Yeah, I mean, the top 5 most dangerous states in the country are red states. It's no coincidence that the same people who are screaming about blue state chaos and how New York City is an anarchy republic are desperately trying to distract from their own problems. And there's no sign that they take that seriously. These Republican governors aren't interested in governing. They've defunded their own police in many cases, and they have nothing left but this distraction. And voters don't buy it. You can't spin your way out of clear problems of leadership like that.
No, I hope you're right, because, they're running such bad campaigns. They've got on issue after issue the wrong position, or if they have a position at all. and yet I still have this aching pit feeling in the pit of my stomach that they know something that the rest of us don't. That they're rigging this as we speak, and I hate thinking like that. But I look at Georgia, man, where they're challenging thousands of people to try and get them purged off the rolls. They're doing all kinds of shenanigans. This story out of Michigan where hey, good Republican, who knows what he was doing.
And there is a note of caution. I mean, I think Joe Manchin is closer than more generous estimates, because if you look at 2016, 2020, there was polling error. Democrats underperformed their polls in both races. And that's one, because MAGA Republicans are the most likely group to lie to pollsters of any group. And that there are also new voters coming into this that sway the election either way. So it is likely that there will be a narrower victory for Democrats than expected. But a few months ago, we were talking about how big Republican control of both houses would be. Yep. So I am more than happy to take a win on narrow grounds. And if Republicans take the House with 5 votes or 5 seats, I would love to see how they try to frame that as some red mandate to govern.
Yeah, especially, there's part of me that goes, maybe that's the best scenario. Give them a little bit of rope, because they're going to hang themselves.
Well, the all worry is they also hang the Republic with them. I mean, as we've seen, they can't really be trusted with power. But the numbers are trending the right way. There's now roughly a 1 in 3 chance of Democrats holding the House. That's not bad. I mean, there's a lot of desire to be pessimistic about this, but there is also a lot of time left. And at the rate we're seeing these polls move, I'm still really optimistic. There's a lot of field here still to maneuver in.
Yeah, and look, in this moment, interestingly enough, like you said, 6 months ago, we were talking about, there's a red wave coming. There's all this negativity. The Democrats, Biden's polling ratings, approval ratings were in the tank, but a couple of good wins, legislative victories, some good policy to move us in a direction. What's going on in the Supreme Court, kind of turning that around.
Yeah, I mean, the numbers are certainly exciting. I mean, we see in Kansas, almost 70% of all new voters in Kansas this year are women who came out to vote to protest the ban on abortion, the attempt to ban abortion there. We saw that there are 300,000 new Democratic voters in Texas. That now gives them a 10-point advantage over Republicans in registered voters. The enthusiasm is there. It's up to the party to mobilize these voters and bring them out.
Now, what do you say to Gavin Newsom, who's saying they got to do better on messaging? Because I think we've had this conversation a bunch. I think Democrats have to get much sharper elbows. I think they've got to get in there and throw much bigger punches and do it from a working class perspective. Stop with all of the divisive stuff and get on economic issues, get on how lives are getting better, how we're reshoring manufacturing, how we're investing in the future of this country. I think that's the path forward.
Yeah, I mean, to some extent, it's a self-confidence issue. The Democrats have just not felt like they were going to win, and they've worn that on their sleeves. And now there's a little bit of confidence. You start to see Democrats talking about abortion, pushing back on this gas price inflation stuff and pointing out the prices are going down. They're more comfortable now talking about the legislation they've delivered. We need to do more of that. And Gavin Newsom, I would love to have him play some kind of management role in directing funding or bringing in outside funding for this, because what we really need is to create these sort of messaging operations state by state. This cannot all be run from Washington. This will have to be done locally in a language that local voters feel is authentic from people they trust. And if Gavin has a plan, I mean, I am more than happy to hear him out.
Yeah, I think it's important. But ultimately, I keep getting this from a lot of women emailing me saying it's going to be all about Rovember.
Yeah, I mean, I still believe that very firmly. All the things we've seen as these months have gone on since the Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade, we've seen more and more and more enthusiasm. Abortion as a top priority issue is up 14 points since last year. I mean, that is massive. We're talking about a Democratic Party that could not even say the word abortion for most of this year, even when they knew it was under threat. And now they're out full barrel pushing this and winning elections like Pat Ryan in New York. And it just takes a few of those to give Democrats the confidence to talk about it more. But to your point, I mean, that needs to be mixed with bread and butter issues because abortion is centrally important, but so is your ability to pay your mortgage. So is your ability to know that your job was saved because of some of these spending packages Joe Biden passed. These all have to work together.
No, absolutely. And this is where I come back to my original premise of, Democrats have to be much bolder. They got to be much more progressive. They've got to actually do the stuff people want. I mean, this Republican light stuff that we've seen over the years hasn't worked. It's gotten us in this place we're in. So for me, I want bolder action. I want more progressive policy. I want to move in a direction that's going to actually make lives better.
Yeah, I agree. And what I'm starting to shout here, and I will through the rest of this race, is we need to fund state parties. Those state parties get that message out on the hyper local level. The DNC is having some of its best fundraising cycles in history, but all that money is staying in Washington. Well, a lot of these state parties are in real financial trouble. And the best thing we can do is make sure those parties are strong, that they're registering and recruiting voters, that they're building benches and sending out mail and hitting the airwaves. That's how we put that message forward.
Yeah, and you're funding local candidates because, again, all this stuff is going to revert back to the state houses and the state senate, the state legislatures. This is, and then even further down. I mean, Republicans are drilling down into school boards.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, now in Florida, especially school board races that were formerly nonpartisan, Governor DeSantis is proudly weighing in and electing conservative Republicans who don't believe that Toni Morrison should be read in schools. They don't believe that anatomy and biology should be taught. I mean, these are things that most people are not going to be aware of unless they are told about it on the local level by their local and state parties. And we need to make sure that that threat is really publicized because it is ground up authoritarianism here.
Yeah. No, see, for me, like the other day, I talked about Biden's call to end childhood poverty in just 8 years. That, to me, is the kind of bold vision that we need and the kind of action that we need to be talking about and moving forward, and something that calls us to be our better selves. Look, they're going to be somebody who's against it. You know what? You leave them behind. But I think the vast majority of people can get on board with something like that.
Yeah. And I mean, there are Republican candidates right now who earnestly say drag queen bingo nights are more dangerous than AR-15s, as if people are being killed by mass glitterings or something. And those candidates are winning. Like I would be more comfortable laughing if they were losing, but they're winning races. And it's because we simply are not educating voters on how critical these school board races are.
So was that drag queen bingo? Is that what you called it?
Yeah. Drag queen bingos, drag queen story hours. I mean, if you look in Pflugerville, Texas, just last week, the Proud Boys and a bunch of far-right groups were protesting a library for having a drag queen story hour. And they were threatening to beat and kill the drag queens and the librarians. And those are the people who are rallying votes to elect Republicans on the local level. That's incredibly dangerous. And for most Americans, they have no idea that's happening.
Yeah, I saw some of the videos in that, and I was just, wow. I just kept going back to wow. I mean, but look, that could be by community. That could be just about anywhere with as crazy as things have gotten.
Yeah, it's insane to say that drag queens are scarring our children. What scars our children is walking out of a library and seeing 40 people with AR-15s fighting their parents and threatening to kill them. We've become so numb almost to these Proud Boys, to this far-right lunacy, that we forget that this language leads to violence. And if we don't push back and start contesting these races, those people will be in charge of what our children learn.
Scary, scary times. Last question I got for you. I got to bring up Jenny Thomas. Evidently, she's still buying the big lie theory. Are you surprised by this? Are you surprised that she's sticking to her story and sticking to her guns, since that's all we heard today? Any thoughts?
Not at all. I mean, she believes it. She's a true believer. This isn't some Charlie Kirk, I want to raise money, so I'll promote MAGA. She really believes that the election was stolen. She is one of the most influential Republicans in Washington who is not an elected official. She's not some ground up person from Florida who came to the Capitol and attacked it. She understands how politics works. She has the money to fund operations, and she's made no mystery out of the fact that she did it and she would do it again. I mean, we need to have her publicly testify as well, so Americans can hear just how nuts she is.
Yeah, I think Clarence Thomas should have to testify to see how nuts he's gotten.
Clarence Thomas should have to go to therapy too.
I'd like to see them move him along anyway. But Max, as always, great stuff. I appreciate the time. Look forward to talking to you again real soon.
Thanks again.
Our good friend Max Burns. Check out the work that he does over at the Daily Beast. We'll get links out on social media. Hi, you can take a look at that. Gonna take a quick break. Right back. Stick around. If you're a fan of the show, you've heard our Labor History in 2 segments, and you can hear them on the radio pretty much anywhere in the U.S. Labor history has never been more important than it is right now. So here's what we'd like you to do. Tell a teacher. Tell a teacher that labor history is important and that they can get digestible 2-minute lessons that are absolutely free. Free to download, free to use, free to share. Tell a teacher to go to thericksmithshow.com/history and help us put labor back where it belongs, in the classroom. You know, generations of American workers fought, bled, and died to build the American way of life. It's our job to keep their stories alive. Go tell a teacher that we're here to help them do just that. Find us at thericksmithshow.com/history today.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
Got a couple of emails pushing back on the earlier conversation with Kurt when he called in about his neighbor. You know, I wish we could get back to a place where you could you weren't judged solely on who you voted for in the last election. I wish we could get back to that, because I do remember those days. But you know, some of the folks have made some points that, look, how do you support somebody who is a white supremacist? How do you support somebody who wants to destroy democracy? How do you support? And I get it. I completely get it. I do just. I want to get back to that place where, you know, where we can have just conversations, because I think that's the way that we find common ground, we find understanding, and we get to move forward. And as I've been saying, I think the way forward in all of this is in the workplace. I think how we do this is we organize like my grandparents did. You organize those workplaces. You fight for those better wages, hours, conditions. You find that common ground. You know, on every issue, I think about over the years, the things that have popped up and how our union and the companies handled things and how the workforce handled things. It was never a big deal. You know, like I said, you know, recently, the transgender issue happened 30 years ago. Nobody cared. Why now? Well, because the moneyed interest are shoving it down our throats and telling you to be afraid of it, telling you to hate your neighbor. We got to push back. Let's go to the phone. It's got Alice on one. Alice, how are you today?
I'm doing well. You know, I too have a very good neighbor, and we are complete polar opposites. I'm a Democrat. I'm not a Christian. They're evangelicals, and they voted for Trump. And as long as we don't talk religion, and we can discuss it, we can discuss religion. In fact, they've come to the point where they realize that my religion is not a threat to them. But we try to stay away from politics. Some things we can talk about on a local level. And they're excellent neighbors. But I think the problem is, for the most part, with a lot of these extreme Republicans, I'm trying to be nice here, especially the Trump supporter ones, you can't have a conversation or find common ground with them because they're not living in the same reality as the rest of us.
Yeah. No, the fives, the fives you let go. But there are the fours. Maybe you can make them threes. There are threes. Maybe you can make them twos. I mean, at some point, we've got to reach out and pull back the folks we can help. The ones you can't, you're never getting Jenny Thomas to come back to the fold. It's never going to happen.
No, she needs some help. And as for the drag queens, I have this much to say. I love drag queens. I love them. I used to have a friend that was a drag queen, and I would help. I would buy him shoes and things like that if I would be out and see them in a secondhand store. And I love watching RuPaul's Drag Race. And the only thing I have to say is, if anybody is going to stop the drag race stuff, and I do not get to watch my RuPaul's Drag Race, we're going to have a serious issue. Because at 62 years of age, I think I can darn well watch what I want. But, hey, these extremists, I'm tired of them.
There you go.
I just wish they'd all poof away. Sort of like Trump with his little magic poofing. Maybe they can, poof.
How's it again? Magic poofing?
Yes, magic poofing, a zappy finger or something equally amusing.
There you go.
But have a good evening, Greg.
Thank you, Alice. Appreciate the call. Poofing, magic poofing. Yeah, that's it. That's it. Look, again, we've had drag queens for forever. In fact, I think my wife still has the picture of years ago, and it's been a long time. We went to, I think it was Provincetown, Massachusetts. And we went and saw a drag show and took a picture and right before they took the picture, the guy grabbed my behind. And I was like, and the picture shows me kind of like, whoa, what was that all about? Was I offended? No. Was I angry? No. Of course, and as my wife said, did she laugh? Yeah. And it's one of those things that, I don't know why this stuff becomes end of the world kind of stuff. Now, are there times and places for that? Yeah, absolutely. Do they belong in schools doing their shows? I don't think so. But that's a parental choice. But this whole idea that the end of humanity is coming because people are expressing themselves is just bizarre. And look, I may not agree with what people do, and that's okay. And this is where the other side, this is where the left has to understand as well. Look, may not agree, may not like it, but you go do your thing. Life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. I don't have to accept it. I don't have to like it. I don't have to do it. But I don't get to stop you from doing it. And this is where this idea of we don't always have to agree about everything. But we do have to respect each other. And I'm hoping we get back to that. Because we're not there now. We're most certainly not there. When people are writing F Biden on their lunchbox for their kids to see, there's something wrong with the moment that we're in. There's something wrong. There's something wrong. Love to email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. You got any thoughts, questions, comments? I want to hear it. Also, if you miss any portion of the program, make sure you grab the podcast wherever you find your favorite podcast, from iTunes to iHeart, Stitcher to Podbean, everywhere in between. That's where we'll be found. Gonna take a quick break. When we come back, Tim Hogan's going to be here from Heartland Signal to share some of the real interesting nonsense.
I'm Rick Smith.
and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1789. That was the day that the United States Congress officially created the United States Army. Not everyone agreed that the U.S. should have a standing army. 2 years earlier, at the meeting that drafted the U.S. Constitution, James Madison warned against a permanent federal army. He told those at the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia, quote, "A standing military force with an overgrown executive will not long be safe companions to liberty." Since Madison was a strong proponent of a centralized federal government, his caution about the Army was noteworthy. Perhaps these warnings is why it took Congress until the last day of their session to finally approve the measure. In fact, President George Washington had to write Congress not once, but twice to get them to act on the issue. Once it was approved, the first standing army had about 800 members. By comparison, in 2015, the Army had just under 500,000 active duty soldiers. To supplement the small army, Congress also made a provision for the president to call up troops from state militias. The stated purpose for such call-ups was, quote, protecting the inhabitants of the frontiers of the United States from hostile incursions of the Indians. While in federal service, the state militias were supposed to receive, quote, the same as the pay and substance as the regular army. One time, various state militias were used for the forced removal of the Cherokee people from the southeast on the Trail of Tears in the 1830s. State militias were also deployed to break up labor strikes. Such is the case in the Homestead Strike in Pennsylvania in 1892. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
It's been a record year of runaway wealth for America's billionaires, with this tiny clique vastly widening the chasm separating them from us hoi polloi. For example, Amazon Hefe Jeff Bezos hauled in $190 billion for the year. That pays him more than $360,000 a minute for every single minute of the year. So much taken by so few, who do so little while harming so many. Bezos erected his corporate empire on the backs of non-union workers he routinely exploits, plus millions of taxpayers he bilks. Indeed, his recent surge of wealth comes not from innovation or hard work, but from the windfall of bloated Wall Street stock prices, making him richer without lifting a finger. Yet, media and politicians hail Jeff as a big-thinking genius. Seriously? This self-centered ego's top achievement this year was to have the world's largest super yacht built for him, a 400-foot-long seagoing palace. But, oops, Jeff's pleasure craft can't get to the ocean because it's too tall to go under a bridge just downriver from the Dutch city where he's having it built. No problem for a billionaire genius, though. Boss Bezos simply instructed local officials to dismantle their historic bridge so his toy could pass through. But no go, for outraged locals learned of his imperious scheme and quickly organized a massive rotten egg brigade, pledging to pelt the colossal yacht and possibly Jeff. Very bad political optics. So the American mogul's billions were not allowed to buy his way out. This is Jim Hightower saying, it's still unclear how he'll get it out to sea, but one Dutch wag helpfully pointed out to him, you can still take your giant boat out for short trips down to the bridge and back. If these mega-rich privileged ones are so smart, why are they so stupid?
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is Rick Smith.
So we're closing in on, well, it's going to be October soon. And like I said, we're going to be hitting the road, going to be doing our Working Class Heroes tour. Going to take us through Pennsylvania into Ohio, Michigan, Wisconsin, Iowa, back through Ohio. Going to be an incredible month of getting out, talking to people, putting the thumb on the pulse. And Wisconsin's one of the states that I'm really looking forward to because there's a big Senate race there, and it would be great to see someone like Ron Johnson sent packing. But here to share some stories and some thoughts on, well, some of the candidates banging around pretty much on the trail where we're heading. I've asked Tim Hogan to come talk with us. Tim is the executive editor over at Heartland Signal, our good friends over at WCPT-AM 820. Their website, heartlandsignal.com. Tim, thanks for taking time for us.
Great to be here, Rick.
So I'm looking at Wisconsin, and I'm getting a little worried because the polls are tightening as they do. But here's the weird thing: I'm looking at Ron Johnson, and are you buying any of this recent word salad about the electors that he had his fingers possibly on? You buying any of this?
No, it's only gotten worse for him in terms of explaining what's going on here. He obscurely involved a Republican congressman early on, tried to blame him. The Republican congressman's like, I haven't talked to Ron Johnson in a decade. Now the story is focused on, I received 3 texts and sent 2 texts to my chief, and that's it. Or I sent 3 and I received 2. I don't quite remember. But his whole point is that, I was only involved for a few seconds here. I was only involved for a few minutes. Sort of like if you had someone on trial who pulled the trigger of a gun and they said, I only shot the gun for like 1 second. It's not that big a deal. I was barely involved. So, the truth remains that he was involved in an effort to deliver that slate of false electors to the vice president. And that's the bottom line. And you sort of watch Ron Johnson in this recent interview catch himself saying, I was barely involved. And he catches himself and tries to say, I was not involved. But he can't keep his story straight. He was involved, and that's the bottom line.
Yeah, and he also at one point tried to go into if the president asks you to do something, and when he said that, my mind went, hold on a second. Why would the president come to you to talk to his vice president? Why would you be in the middle of that unless it was something really shady?
Yeah, it's like he's trying to clear things up, but only makes it worse for himself. I do think, it is good, and it's with this reporter holding him accountable in a sit-down interview. She gets to ask some questions and force him to answer. And this is what happens when you apply any sort of pressure to Ron Johnson outside of the right-wing radio ecosystem where he lives and breathes every single day in Wisconsin and nationally. Is he can't really handle himself. And it really is that senator that needs to be shown to the voters of Wisconsin. I mean, the bottom line, too, is there are so many other things that people care about. And it's not like Mandela Barnes or Democrats in Wisconsin are making the case against Ron Johnson with only this being their point. It's mostly that this is such a distraction from everything that actually needs to get done, that this guy should be doing in Washington, D.C. And we're on the 7th or 8th iteration of him trying to explain his involvement in an effort to overturn democracy. There's so much to be done, and he's bad on all those issues. So it is, it's a little obfuscating, I think, to focus on this so much, but at the same time, you can't not pay attention to your state senator attempting to overthrow an election.
Yeah, but here's the thing: even if you're a MAGA hat wearing, you bought the red hat, you swallowed the red pill, you're flying the red flag, whatever it is you're doing, even if you think this is all a hoax and all nonsense, I still come back to the one thing that Ron Johnson said and did that I don't know how any working person can possibly get by. And that is when the postal trucks that were supposed to be made in Wisconsin were shipped over to South Carolina. He said, well, we've got enough jobs here. And you go, wait a second, those were good union jobs with good family sustaining wages and health security and retirement security and a future. And you just said, we don't need, we got too many jobs as it is.
I mean, absolutely right. Totally ridiculous. And I would say a counterpart to that comment for him, too, is a lot of the times when he's asked about outsourcing, he says, well, it doesn't really make sense for us to bring all those jobs back. I mean, it is just someone abdicating public service to say, don't worry about the outsourced jobs. They're gone. They're not coming back. When we read reports like in the New York Times about manufacturing jobs, they are coming back. They might be changing, but there are manufacturing jobs that are coming back. But they won't come back if you don't have people in the Senate fighting for you. And oftentimes you think about like, oh, what can a single senator do to affect the economy and jobs? But the postal truck issue is such a clear example of what that can look like if you don't have someone who's going to fight for you to keep those jobs there. It literally means those jobs can leave your state. It's a very real way. It's a very clear way of making that issue real for people.
No, absolutely. And this is where you go, he's got to go. I mean, for me, of all the other stuff, we could argue about all the other stuff. That, to me, the one issue, if you're a working person in Wisconsin, and if you're struggling to make ends meet, and if you're working 2 and 3 jobs and you don't have health care and you're worried about retirement security and job security, and you got a senator who basically just told you, yeah, you're fine. You're doing just fine. You don't need those good union jobs. We'll let those go to South Carolina, where we can have low wage jobs there too, so that company can line its pockets at the taxpayer's expense. I mean, I don't think there's anything. I would be saying that every single day if I was running against him.
I agree. Couldn't agree more.
But here's the thing. I mean, as bad as he is, there's crazy all over the country going on right now. I look at the gubernatorial candidate in Minnesota, this Scott Jensen, who evidently he's been railing on big pharma and big technology, and that's been his thing. But his number 2, well, not so much.
I mean, he is. So we looked at this. We looked at some of the financial disclosures of his running mate for Lieutenant Governor Matt Burke. Scott Jensen's the top of the ticket. He's the gubernatorial candidate. And look, there's always, I think, this faux populist message from some Republicans. They rail against big tech. They rail against big pharma a little bit. But then when, rubber's supposed to meet the road and it comes to holding them accountable or to standing up for the little guy against large corporations, we generally don't see that pans out in any meaningful way. And, I wish Scott Jensen would do a little bit of research on his own running mate, because one of the companies, which is a very well-known Minnesota company, 3M, Scott Jensen's running mate, Matt Burke, has some holdings in that company. So, he's railing against these corporations, and 19 of them that you could, categorize as big tech or big pharma or big business, that Matt Burke has some sort of investiture in. And I will just say, too, the point here is that since I can remember, in Minnesota, gubernatorial candidates and their running mates have released their tax returns. As much as it's a tradition in the United States for our presidential candidates to do that, even though the previous president ignored that, it is also a tradition to do that in Minnesota for accountability purposes. They haven't done it. They won't do it. So this raises more questions about why that's something that they have not done yet.
Again, it's amazing. It's amazing when they point their finger at somebody, what's pointing back at them. Crazy stuff. You're listening to the Rick Smith Show here with Tim Hogan. Tim is the executive editor over at Heartland Signal, heartlandsignal.com, our radio partners over at WCPT AM 820 there in Chicago. Let's come back to my state of Pennsylvania. We got a guy running for governor who I think is the craziest in the country. I think he's by far the worst. I've said flat out, I think he's a Nazi, but he's evidently now going to go on a little jaunt, 40 days of prayer and fasting. There's part of me that hope we go off into the woods and we don't hear from him again. But some new audio unearthed of his position on women and abortion. Not surprising.
Yeah. He has said, I mean, like you're alluding to in that audio, he's asked about a piece of legislation that he would propose as a state senator. And this is back in 2019, which is a 10-week abortion ban. And the reporter asks him the question on the air whether or not that would result in prosecuting the woman for murder in the instance of an abortion, in the instance of violating an abortion ban. And that would theoretically apply no matter what week you are talking about, whatever gets codified or is the law in the state of Pennsylvania, whether or not they would be charged with murder. And his answer, after dodging the question 2 times, the reporter finally gets him to answer with a very straight yes on the third answer. So yeah, I to your point, Doug Mastriano, extremely radical, out of touch for Pennsylvania, and we've seen the same polls. He's down a bunch of points to Josh Shapiro. I think 10 in the last that I saw, and I just hope it stays that way.
I hope it stays that way, because as I tell all my labor friends, you're one vote away from your union basically being extinct, because this guy will sign right to work or the no rights at work legislation faster than they did in Kentucky, and he'll do it gleefully and use it aggressively against working people, because ultimately it's about punishing people, I think, in this guy's view. Hopefully these voters of Pennsylvania come out and they vote against him. Let's move back to Minnesota. Their Secretary of State candidate, this Kim Crockett. This group, Project Syphilis, I mean Project Veritas. Is anything they do accurate? Is anything that they do, honest? I mean, and the fact that you have this woman who's running for Secretary of State quoting them is problematic. But I look at this group and going, lots of problems.
Yeah, it's wild. Kim Crockett, Secretary of State candidate, puts on the Minnesota Nice show, but then you listen to her answer some questions on right-wing radio, and she is potentially the most right-wing statewide candidate in Minnesota, at least in terms of embracing conspiracy theory. And I say that with Scott Jensen, like I mentioned before, on the ballot, who is a COVID denier every which way. So she was on a Rhode Island radio station, right-wing radio station, in 2020. I'm not entirely certain why that is happening, or if there's a big right-wing radio ecosystem in Rhode Island, but there's at least one. And we heard her discussing this video Project Veritas put out in 2020, debunked information, selectively edited. Minnesota Press did a very, very good job, the press corps there, explaining how the video is incorrect. But what she holds on to is the initial presentation of the video, and she accuses organizers in Minneapolis of selling ballots for cash and then funding Al-Shabaab, which is designated by the United States as a terrorist organization in Somalia. So, all just, I don't even know where to go with that. You think frequently with the work that we do, looking at Republican candidates and the extreme things that they say, I sometimes think to myself, we're going to hit the end of the line here of novel ways to say crazy things because we've exhausted all options. But Kim Crockett proving that there's always a new wild conspiracy theory to espouse.
No, what's scary is, this is somebody who's running for Secretary of State. And I know in my state of Pennsylvania, they've got such enormous power when it comes to voting and voting rights and the things that are going on. And I worry about people like this in these positions because, a lot of the criming that we're seeing going on are the MAGA folks who are claiming, well, Joe Biden stole the last election, so they somehow, I think, feel entitled or empowered to steal this election. And I think I have a problem with that.
Yeah. I mean, look, these are normally sleepy offices. We don't hear a lot about them. I think, we are lucky that we had the folks in place who were in place for the 2020 election. But you lose any of these really big states where these Secretary of States are running. Christina Caramo in Michigan, Kim Crockett in Minnesota, Mark Fincham in Arizona, Jim Marchant in Nevada. Those are all swing states. And those folks are all have all voiced things that are highly concerning about how they would administer elections in their state. And so, 2022 very important for the 2024 battlegrounds.
Man, it's interesting you brought up Michigan because today the story you had a guy, what's his name, Hulk Boer. He's an election inspector at the Gaines Township 8th Precinct. Evidently, they caught him sticking a thumb drive into one of the poll books, which has all the personal confidential information of all the people that would vote there. Why would somebody want that?
I don't know. I don't know, but it's scary, the degree with which, we've seen reporting on. I think Heidi Prisbilla did a really good job at Politico a while back, showing particularly, I think, in Michigan, the training that Republicans are doing for local organizers to challenge and to really know the machinery, physically, like you're describing in some sense. And that gives, you need a good Secretary of State in order to make sure that stuff doesn't happen.
No, and you see these stories of, all over the country where they're sitting on drop boxes and ready to challenge people. And it's going to be very interesting next couple of weeks. But Tim, I appreciate you taking time for us. Keep up the great work. I hope you come back and talk to us again real soon.
Thanks, Rick.
Good stuff. Tim Hogan, the executive editor there at Heartland Signal, heartlandsignal.com, the website. Make sure you check out the work that they do. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk. Are you tired of think tank approved corporate news and commentary? Are you tired of CEOs telling you what to think, who to hate, and who to vote for? Well, welcome to the Rick Smith Show. We don't take orders from some boardroom, and we don't do focus groups or talking points. We don't work for them, and we never will. I'm Rick Smith, and I work for you. Join us daily at thericksmithshow.com and download the podcast and never miss a minute. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1931. Canadian coal miners, their wives, and children marched through the streets of Estevan, Saskatchewan. The miners were on strike for union recognition and better pay and working conditions. Safety was a major concern for the 600 men and boys who worked in the mines. Water collected in many work areas. Too often, the mine companies failed to replace rotting timber, so roof cave-ins were frequent. Inadequate ventilation led to high concentrations of carbon dioxide. For braving this dangerous underground work, the miners earned only 25 cents for each ton of coal. The miners had joined the Mine Workers Union of Canada earlier that year. They called a strike in September, but coal mine operators refused to meet their demands. Miners and their families decided to demonstrate in the town of Estevan to gain community support. The mayor banned the demonstration and called upon the Royal Canadian Mounted Police to crush the march. The Mounties met several hundred miners and their families and attempted to block the procession. They opened fire on the unarmed crowd. 3 striking miners were killed and many others were wounded and arrested. Finally, on October 6th, the mine owners finally agreed to an 8-hour workday and a minimum wage of $4 a day. But they refused to recognize the union. It was not until the end of World War II that the United Mine Workers finally won recognition in the Saskatchewan coalfields. The strike remains a controversial event in Estevan. The 3 miners who were killed have the inscription "Murdered by RCMP" on their headstones. Over the years, locals have alternately erased and restored these inscriptions. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com, like us on Facebook, and follow us on the Twitters at LaborHistoryIn2. Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. So today, going to be our last live show for a little while, as we're going to be taking the show on the road, doing a bunch of recording from the road. It's always difficult to do live shows during road trips, and we're going to be like a day behind. But every day we're going to bring you new places, talk to new people. And share stories of areas. And look, like I said, we're going to start off in Allentown. And 40 years ago, the Billy Joel song "Allentown" came out, and I think introduced people to a place that that's not kind of how Allentown is. But I remember the first time when I moved there in '93. I brought that up to somebody, and they were kind of angry about it. And I didn't realize it was for some that it was a point of anger. And I'm like, no, this is a great song of triumph. This is this is stick-to-itiveness. This is that American grit, that working class kind of positivity. That you're gonna fight through it. You're gonna win. You're gonna persevere. You're gonna get to the other side, kind of thing, even though everything's stacked against you. Even though corporate America is screwing you over, and the economy's going against you, and you're going to get up and you're going to dust yourself off. I mean, it was pure Americana, and there's part of me that goes, this is, I think, what we're going to find as we go to the places that have been hit the hardest. And when I threw this idea out as something that I wanted to do, it was focused on places that had really strong manufacturing roots. I bring up Toledo, Ohio, as one of the places that we're going to go to. Toledo was the glass capital of the world. They had all the big glass companies there. When I was a kid, if you drank out of a water glass or, you had a glass bowl, it probably came from Toledo. That's how big and powerful the industry was. And sadly, it's mostly all gone. And there's a museum there to the legacy of the glass history. And sadly, that museum is made out of Chinese glass. And I think it shows where we have come as a society, as a country, and the bad policies that have gotten us into this. I truly believe that we can have conversations on how we move everyone forward. Don't focus as much on our divisions. Focus on the common things of us wanting to move forward. I think we got a better shot at moving the country forward, at becoming that we generation. For far too long, we've been the I and me, mine, me. The one with the most toys wins. Me. It's time to start. Yeah, think about yourself, but to think about others. And this is kind of where my mind is going as we're embarking on this trip. And look, I don't know where it's going to take us. We've had 14 days to put together a month-long tour. It's going to be seat of our pants. It's going to be fast-paced. It's going to be unpredictable. And that's what I love about it. This is going to be exciting to find out what at the end we look at and what we come back with. And you're going to help us. I've gotten hundreds of emails from people going, you got to come here and tell this story, and you got to go here. And thank you. It has been fabulous, going through some of that stuff. And ultimately, we may pop into a couple of these places. But for me, it's about that main story, that the working class of this country at one point was a prosperous working class. Wealth was distributed in a more equal way. You didn't have 1% of the population owning 34% of the wealth of the country. And everyone did better. That's what I want to see us get back to, a bit of equality that moves us in that direction. And as I said before, I grew up in a predominantly black neighborhood. I was a minority in a minority community. And what I realized very young is it wasn't about black and white. It wasn't about the color of our skin. It was about the fact that none of us had anything in our pockets. The only color that mattered was green, because we were all broke at the end of the month. And it was those jobs, those union jobs, that made lives better. That's where I want to focus my attention. That's where I want to spend time and hearing stories of. As we're doing the prep for this, I've got people who just going, you say, no, save that for when we get there, save that. And people want to talk. People want to share their stories. They want to share what they remember, and they want to share how we can move forward. And this is where our political leaders need to be listening. They need to be paying attention. Because it's easy to get caught in the bubble. It's easy to get caught in the, oh, you're so perfect. No, you need to get out and hear real stories. And again, this is where I think Trump, the blind squirrel, found a nut. He tapped into the anger that's out there, because there's a lot of working class people who don't believe their government is fighting for them. They don't believe the policy is aimed at helping them. And I argue this administration, like none in my lifetime, is actually doing the work to help make things better. Reinvesting in infrastructure, reshoring manufacturing, talking about strengthening unions, education. I think we're heading in a positive direction. But we're going to find out what you think as we hit the road tomorrow on the program. We're going to be playing a best of from our time at Netroots Nation. First show from Allentown, from Pennsylvania on Monday. Looking forward to that. Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. You've got a place where we should go. I want to hear it. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Thanks so much for being here. If you miss any portion of the program, podcast, make sure you grab that. See you back here next time.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Email Rick at rick@thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.